Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So obviously in the last 24 hours we've learned the news that Caleb Plant versus Canelo Alvarez, the undisputed fight at 168, will no longer be going ahead as planned in September. Essentially there was a breakdown in the contract negotiations. Now, Canelo Alvarez hasn't really released his side of the story yet, but Caleb Plant has. He came right out and basically put his side of the story out there, and I will read it verbatim. His bark is bigger than his bite. Canelo was offered the highest guarantee of his career. He was set to make $40 million plus Mexican TV rights and his Hennessy sponsorship. No problem, let's fight. We gave it to him. Then he wanted an upside of the gate and the pay-per-view revenue. No problem, let's rumble. It was always agreed that it was a title unification, no rematch for either fighter. Towards the end of the negotiations they asked for a rematch when they lose. No problem, you can have a rematch as well. I just want to fight. Plant told ESPN that he agreed to his side of the deal 2 weeks ago, with no arguments about money or any stipulations, besides the one-way rematch clause. It would only go into effect if Alvarez lost, which Plant said he agreed to. There was also the matter of the ring size. Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders battled over the distance inside the ropes ahead of their May fight, which Alvarez won by a 9th round TKO after he fractured the Brit's orbital bone. In the end, Alvarez got his wish, a 22 by 22 foot ring. The Nevada State Athletic Commission guidelines call for a standard 20 by 20 foot ring. Plant agreed to it. The Nashville native also said that the star fighter had other ridiculous requests. One that is absurd is that if I get injured or sick, then he gets a late replacement for the same amount of guarantee money, but if he gets sick or injured, we have to wait for him. We're at 7.5 weeks from the fight. We've lost valuable time that should be spent promoting and drug testing for a fight of this magnitude. I question whether legacy or money is their real motive. We've been waiting for him to get done with his wedding, shooting his TV show, his golf tournament, and now we've tried to give him everything that he wants, and more, to make this fight. I'm more than willing, able, and ready to fight Canelo Alvarez on any date. Those are the real facts, and if anybody has something to say differently, we have the paperwork to prove it. So those are the words of Caleb Plant. Now, one of the main sticking points from what has been said is essentially the injury clause, where if Caleb Plant gets injured, then Canelo Alvarez can draft a late replacement who more than likely won't be a great fighter, and he gets paid the same guarantee of $40 million plus all of the other perks that he would have got for fighting Caleb Plant anyway. I don't see how any broadcaster would accept that sort of deal. You know, the nature of late replacements usually are that they are a lesser opponent than the original opponent. So why people are blaming PBC, Caleb Plant, Al Heyman and Fox for turning that down is beyond me. Who in their right mind would accept that? If you're a TV broadcaster, would you accept that deal? The fight you want to put on is Plant versus Canelo. And Plant, let's say Plant gets injured 10 days out. Who can Canelo fight realistically in 10 days? Probably somebody on the level of Avni Yildirim. Are you going to pay him $40 million to fight that sort of guy? Of course not. Of course not. And the whole notion that if Canelo Alvarez gets injured, Caleb Plant can't take a stay busy fight again is totally unfair. That's a bullshit clause that is designed to affect performance. It's complete bullshit. If Canelo does get injured, what's wrong with Caleb Plant fighting a late replacement guy to stay busy? What's wrong with that? Why is it up to Canelo whether Caleb Plant should be allowed to do that or not? And people are twisting this. People are saying Caleb Plant wanted the same demands as Canelo, where he would get the same pay and it would be on Fox pay-per-view if he were to get a late replacement. That's not what he said at all. People are pulling that out of their arse. Basically, how I read it is that Caleb Plant would just want to stay active. Even if it's against a less than stellar opposition, he would just want to stay active. What's wrong with that? Why is it up to Canelo to dictate who Caleb Plant should fight if he gets injured, if Canelo gets injured? I mean, come on, that's a BS clause. You guys know I'm not fond of Caleb Plant. I don't really rate him as a fighter, and I don't really find him all that endearing as a person, but That's a BS clause. If Canelo gets injured, Caleb Plant should be free to take a tune-up if needs be. Why is it up to Canelo how Plant should manage his career? That's complete BS. And Caleb Plant was also insinuating that he's unhappy with the length of time it's taken Canelo to actually, or Canelo's team I should say, and Canelo, to commit to these negotiations. Caleb Plant is saying they've waited for Canelo to have his wedding, they've waited for Canelo to film his TV show, they've waited for Canelo to play his golf, and as a result, it's now only 7.5 weeks out from the fight, and there's been no drug testing. So Caleb Plant is also unhappy about that, and bear in mind, in Canelo Alvarez, we are talking about a certified drug cheat. And again, we are not privy to all of the information here. We've not heard from Canelo Alvarez and his side, but on the surface, it looks like to me, Caleb Plant, Team PBC, do have a few grievances. It seemed like they agreed to all of the monetary demands, and various other demands from Canelo Alvarez. If these negotiations are true, the numbers they're putting forth, the PBC have been more than generous in the money they're offering Canelo. And also it appears they've curtailed to certain demands by Team Alvarez in regards to the one-way rematch clause. So on the surface, the information that's been put forth, it doesn't look like the PBC are being all that unreasonable, but I mean, if this whole thing about this injury clause is true, I can see why Caleb Plant is upset. I can see why Caleb Plant may not be willing to take that contract. You know? I mean, again, who knows? There's two sides to every single story, and people automatically are blaming the PBC, and let's be honest, the PBC do have a track record of scuppering unification fights. We saw that with Wilder and Joshua, Jamal Charlo and Demetrius Andrade. The PBC have a history of messing these sort of fights up. That is true, but Canelo Alvarez also has a history of initiating bullshit clauses in contracts to basically debilitate a fighter on fight night. This is true, this is documented. The rehydration clause in the Danny Jacobs fight, the rehydration clause in the Sergey Kovalev fight, the various catch weights. We know what goes on, right? And yeah, to me, it seems like people are judging or blaming Caleb Plant far too readily. It's almost like he's guilty by association, but, you know, again, it's not like Canelo Alvarez doesn't have a track record of, you know, adding certain BS clauses to contracts. This is true. And maybe not every single fighter is willing to accept those. Maybe Caleb Plant is one of those guys. Maybe he's not willing to sell himself out completely just to get a payday. Again, he said he basically accepted certain BS clauses, certain BS requirements. He accepted those. But maybe this was a step too far. And if that is the case, and what he's saying is true, I wouldn't really blame him, to be honest. I really wouldn't blame him. Plus there's the situation of the shortened drug testing time as well. And again, Canelo is a guy with a track record of being a drug cheat. Facts. So, again, people are being too quick to judge Caleb Plant, but they're not really willing to put that same microscope on Canelo Alvarez. At the end of the day, you know, the PBC do have a track record of messing up these sort of fights. That is true, and we should be suspicious of Team Plant. But on the flip side, you know, Canelo has a track record of BS clauses in contracts that just abuses A-side power. You know, and that's another thing. I see so many idiots on Twitter say, oh, well, Canelo's the A-side. Basically, they're saying he can do whatever he wants. Well, boxing's the only sport in which that is possible. I mean, let's say, for example, Manchester United, they are playing, I don't know, West Bromwich Albion. Man United are a bigger team, obviously, and they generate billions and billions of pounds per year. Far bigger team commercially, historically, etc., etc. Is it fair for Manchester United to say, because we're the bigger team, because we generate more money, because we have more history, and you're only little old West Brom, you have to start this game with 10 players instead of 11? Is that fair? Of course it isn't. And that's what's happening in boxing, essentially, with certain A-side fighters. They'll dictate the drug testing, catch weights, rehydration clauses, glove types, and you clowns out there act like this is fair and just. No, the A-side privilege should only really dictate maybe like location and purse splits. That's it. When it comes to the competitive nature of boxing, you could be fucking Muhammad Ali reincarnated, but you should not be able to dictate what fucking gloves are used, what judges are used, what referee is used, what drug testing agency is used, what you can rehydrate to, etc, etc. That should be left to other parties, not involved with fighters, independent parties. But you know, people are out here acting like that is fair for guys literally to handicap opponents. Oh, but he's the A-side, it's okay. I mean, come on, man. It's absolute fucking nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So listen, who's to blame here? At the end of the day, I'm not privy to the information, and I'm not really sure. Maybe it's the blame goes to both sides. Who the fuck knows? But I only really made this video because the coverage of this particular story is so one-sided. You know, it's like Caleb Plant automatically is to blame. Well, why not try and look at it from Caleb Plant's point of view and potential issues that he may have had? Yeah, he's not the same sort of fighter as Canelo commercially. He doesn't sell the same amount of tickets. He's not a bigger star as Canelo. That is all true. But that doesn't mean he should sell himself out to the point where it affects his competitiveness in the ring. You know, and that's what Canelo has done to many previous opponents. These are facts. You can cry about it, and you can make all of the excuses in the world for it, but that is true. Documented. So, yeah, share your thoughts below. I want to hear your opinions on this particular situation. Now, I'll be honest, yeah, one thing I'll actually finish this video by saying, I could really give a fuck less that this fight has been cancelled or postponed, whatever you want to say. I always felt this was a mismatch anyway. To be honest, I do believe Canelo Alvarez is far better than Caleb Plant. I believe he wins this fight comfortably, but that's not the point of the video. But yeah, in all seriousness, I don't really care that this fight has been postponed. Hopefully we get something better instead of a potential Caleb Plant fight. Anyway, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy. Peace.